moved into the neighborhood that I currently live in, I've been here for some time, more than 15 years, the neighborhood was a substantially different place. One thing that has not changed in that 15 years is that there's a school less than 2 blocks from my house. In fact, one would argue it's less than a block from my house. When my child started to go to school, I was quite happy that he did not go to that school, because in my experience with that school, when I first moved into the neighborhood with my stepdaughter, she went to that school for a time, and it was one of the worst school experiences that I know of that she dealt with. And that's an important thing, and I want to talk about this subject today of vouchers and scholarships on the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host, I'm Kurt, and today is Friday, the 28th of January of 2022. Welcome to everyone who's here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub. If you happen to be catching me on mindsinmynds.com, my Facebook page, or locals.com, and there are a couple other places that you might find me. But anyway, if you happen to be catching me pretty much anywhere, welcome aboard. I'm happy to have you here today, and I'm going to talk, like I say, on the subject of vouchers and scholarships today. Let me go through my notes. They're rather extensive today, so I might spend a lot of time in my notes. I will try to take a little time to discuss things afterwards, but this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. It's been true for a very long time, I believe all of my lifetime, probably a lot longer, that funding for schools goes to those schools, even if people find them dismal failures and, where possible, remove their children on that basis. Because the funds in question are, quote, public, end of quote, it's been counted reasonable to send them to such entities regardless how well or badly they do things. Maybe more importantly, the assumption they should be funded to a certain level even when hemorrhaging students because of their failure seems to be far too common. Worse yet, people who flatly refuse to allow their children to remain in such facilities bear the brunt. They have to pay whatever's needed to keep their children home, often sacrificing income in the process, or to get their children into schools that will actually teach them. Certain individuals have proposed and at times implemented, where they could, some sort of system to combat this. Probably one of the better ideas is a voucher system. The essential idea is the money for education follows the student. An important understanding is merit has little or nothing to do with this process. Merit on the part of the student, not on the part of the school. The student's merit has little to do with the process. In fact, part of the point is the student is likely failing, which is a common reason for parental concern. So when I heard a well-known talking head comparing vouchers to scholarships, I was blown away. You gotta be kidding, right? In most cases, scholarships are awarded based on merit on the part of the student. Not always, that's not always the case, but it's often so. It's assumed the student will be unable to afford schooling even when he or she is an exceptionally promising one. Vouchers don't generally have such an underlying concept. Put another way, scholarships tend to be about performance of the student. Vouchers, on the other hand, tend usually to be about the failure on the part of the school to perform. The other thing about scholarships is they tend not to be public money. They tend to be lots of times privately funded. Vouchers are maybe not quite exclusively about the allocation of public funds to a different end than supporting a failing school, but they're mostly that way. I want it well understood. I'm not trying to say I don't support scholarships. That's not what I'm doing here. Properly used, they're a fine idea. But the battle of folks seeking to implement voucher programs is not at odds with the idea of the scholarship. In fact, in many cases, they don't even apply to the same types of institutions. far more often than not, scholarships apply to secondary and even more so post-secondary education. One more point, then we'll get into the general discussion. In many instances, if a student doesn't get a scholarship, chances are good they'll still be fine. They're performing at a higher level already as a rule. That's not always true, and I get that. For the voucher concept, though, that voucher money will likely mean the difference between success and failure in a much more meaningful way. Again, does that mean I don't agree with scholarships? Not at all. That said, the voucher idea and similar concepts are a totally different and, in my view, far more important idea for a lot of pupils. Okay, done with my notes. Let's get on with this. Look, the reason people presented this voucher concept is simple. It means that people who don't have the money to do things like move their student to a private school or even a charter school or whatever, even people who don't have that ability, if you give them the vouchers or some other thing by which they can, quote, spend their money on something other than what they know to be a locally failing school, which this one that maybe it's better now, I don't know, but I have no reason to believe it based on what I've seen. No parent wants to spend their money on a failing school. I get it. It's not about just the parent. Everybody contributes to that school. And if you think that that's a bad thing, let me just point something out to you. First of all, I would rather, in a sense, that it worked another way. I just don't know another way to make it work at this point. And I'm open to suggestions on that, by the way. But what I do know is this. If you contribute your money, and by contribute I mean pay taxes, you're not really contributing, you're pretty much coerced. So if you pay your taxes, and some of that money goes to education, it's in your best interest to make sure that that money goes to places where people are going to get an education. It's just not complicated, okay? It's just not hard to understand. I don't care if you have children. You're paying the money in taxation anyway, so this ought to interest you as well, okay? You're going to pay the money in taxation. Now, would you rather work next to a brain-dead person or have somebody serving you somewhere or working with you or working for you somewhere who's not very bright? Or would you rather have somebody who's intelligent? I know the answer for me. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out, does it? You don't have to work, do mental gymnastics for this. This is not some big complicated thing. I want people around me, even if they don't necessarily know everything that they need to know when they step into a given position, but who can learn and who can work to understand what it is that they need to know and who can be superior workers. And therefore, I want those people to be put into educational institutions, to be able at least to be put into educational institutions where those people will thrive rather than just surviving, or worse yet, flunking out. And I hope that you're the same on that. And what that means is, if we continue to support failing schools, slip of the tongue, if we continue to support failing schools instead of allowing for money to be shunted to institutions that are actually going to make better students, then what we're doing is we're shorting ourselves. We're short-sheeting our own bed. Okay? It's that simple. It's almost impossible for me to put this in a simpler way. Do you want people around you to be educated, to be unable to understand things, to be adaptable, and to be able to do things? Or do you want them to be working in failing schools that will not help them to become better human beings, and in fact will probably help them to get into lives that are not great? And I think you can see this more in the inner city than you can in places like my little town. It's not tiny, but anyway, the point is, this is no New York City that I find myself in. But what I'm trying to say to you is really simple. The concept of vouchers is not like the concept of scholarships. Scholarships come from outside, typically come from businesses, come from individuals, come from foundations. Vouchers are public money that I can use to put my child in a better situation where my child is potentially failing as a result in part of a failing school system. This is what I wanted to talk about today. Okay, I could talk on this forever, but I need to go ahead and wrap up, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. This is the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I'm your host. I am Kurt. Today is Friday, the 28th of January of 2022. That would be at the sundown today, the beginning of the Sabbath. Tomorrow will be Saturday, the 29th of January of 2022. That will be the end of the Sabbath at sundown on Saturday. Thank you for everyone who's been here on Rumble, on the podcast, on YouTube, on BitChute, on CloudHub, on Locals, on Minds, minds.com. If you happen to be seeing me on my Facebook page, anywhere you happen to be seeing me, remember that Rumble is sort of my preferred platform. You can give me a boxing glove or a Rumble on Rumble if you want to do that. You can give me a like or dislike on any of the platforms where my content is available. You can obviously subscribe to my content if it's offered as an opportunity as well. If you want to and you think it's a good idea, you can comment, and I will do my best to attend to whatever comments are actually shoved in front of my face. And if I think it's reasonable to do so, I will respond. Otherwise, I will just try and kind of hear what it is that you're trying to say. The subject for today has been vouchers and scholarships, and tomorrow we're going to talk about something to say, and I think I might have talked about this before, but maybe not quite from the angle that I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. I hope that you're having a good day today. Be wonderful if everything was going well for you. I hope that new year, as I say, is going ever better. We're getting closer to closing out the first month, that January of that new year, the 2022 year. And I hope that everything is going well for you. And hopefully we will see you again on Friday's edition of the Daily Summation, on Saturday's edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. The speaker on this edition of the Daily Summation is Kurt Schubert. This podcast was recorded on Friday, the 28th of January of 2022. The Daily Summation is created for Kurt's Religion and Politics. Thanks for watching this edition of the Daily Summation from Kurt's Religion and Politics. I hope you found it entertaining or instructional, or maybe both. If you want to see more from me, you can go to blogs.kpschubert.com. That's blogs.kpschubert.com. I am on Twitter, Parler, and Minds.com. My handle on each of those is @kpschubert. That's @kpschubert. I have a Rumble and a YouTube channel. They are the Kurt's Religion and Politics channels on Rumble and YouTube. I have a Facebook page. The Facebook page is Kurt's Religion and Politics as well. I am on Patreon. If you want to support me, that's one of the better places you can do that. And you will find me at Kurt's Religion and Politics on Patreon. I have a podcast. The podcast is podcasts with an S, .kpschubert.com. That's podcasts.kpschubert.com. I think you should be able to find me with relative ease on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify as well. The best way I find to do that is to look for Kurt's Religion and Politics. You can try to use the Daily Summation. I find that it doesn't work as well as a general rule, but you can always try that. I'm glad to have you aboard today, and hopefully we will see you again tomorrow.